last presentation of the day, which is interesting on biopesticide market 2020 to 2025 by Dr. Mark Trimmer. Dr. Trimmer is managing partner of Dunnham Trimmer LLC. He is the editor of To Be Monthly, the Global Biocontrol and Biostimulant e-newsletter, and board member of BPIA Biological Product Industry Alliance. Dr. Trimmer has worked in biological product area since 2003, and he joined NutraPark as Vice President of Research and Development, where he led development and launch a group of biological plant growth regulator products. In the year 2011, Mark co-founded Dunnham Trimmer LLC with William Dunnham. Today's topic of Dr. Trimmer is biological market analysis. So let us hear from Dr. Trimmer about his upcoming segment of agri inputs. So, Mark Trimmer.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Trimmer. I'm the managing partner of Dunnham Trimmer, and I'm very pleased to join you here today to discuss the biological market, and more specifically the biopesticide market, and our view on where this market has been over the preceding 10 years and where we see it going as we move through the next decade towards 2030. I would like to thank the organizers of the International Crop Science Conference and Exhibition for inviting me to participate in this meeting and to share our thoughts with you. Dunnham Trimmer is celebrating its 10th anniversary in 2021. We were formed in 2011 when Bill Dunnham and I, both having had experience in the traditional crop protection and seed markets, came together and recognized that there was an opportunity, there was a need for some independent market research on biopesticides and biostimulants. We were fortunate with our timing, as at the same time, many of the larger crop protection companies began to make investments and acquisitions in this space. We were able to add some very talented individuals to our staff over the last few years. Manel Cervera, based in Spain, has a strong background in commercial activity with the biostimulant space. Rick Melnick, based outside of Chicago here in the US, joined us about a year ago. His experience is in marketing communications in the biocontrols area. And most recently, Massimo Toni has joined us with a wealth of experience and a very broad network in the biocontrol and biostimulant market. And Massimo is based in Switzerland. We provide services ranging from strategic marketing, from technical evaluations, market evaluations, and also we do quite a lot of work in the area of investment due diligence, as mergers and acquisitions continue to be a significant portion of this space. I always try to include a slide like this in my presentations because I think it's important to be clear on what we're talking about when we say biological products. We include both the biological control products, which are the biopesticides and macroorganisms, as well as the crop improvement products, which encompass the biostimulants and the biofertilizers in the scope of the markets that we cover. We think it's very important to be clear in what we're talking about, because we often see with other market research reports that there's a lack of clarity. They'll talk about the global microbial market, but won't be clear whether they're talking about microbial biopesticides, microbial biostimulants, or biofertilizers, all of which can be microbials. So we try to be clear. Today, I'm going to spend the majority of my time talking about the biological control marketplace, so the biopesticide and macroorganism markets. If anyone would like a copy of this slide, please email me after the presentation. I'd be happy to provide it to you. So if we look at the historical development and growth of the biocontrol market, this market really emerged in the early to mid 1990s. At that point, it was very much limited to organic producers. These were the products that the organic growers used because they didn't have the option to use any chemical product to control pests or diseases or weeds in their fields. But in the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen an accelerated growth in this space, driven by both consumer demands and by the entry of multinational companies that have greatly increased the marketing power behind many of these products. As a result, we see an increasing steepness of that curve as the growth rate of the biocontrol market accelerates. Today, majority of biocontrol products are used in fruit and vegetable crops, but they're no longer limited to organic producers only. It's now used together in conventional areas and usually integrated with chemical control solutions to provide the benefits of both types of approaches. What are some of the trends that have driven the adoption and the development of the biocontrol market? Well, on the top left of this graph, you see, the number one trend is just simply increasing population growth. With increasing population, of course, there's demands for increased food supply. But at the same time, in many parts of the world, we see that there's also changes in economics that are leading to people add more meat to their diet, and that increases the demand for feed for the livestock. As the growers are trying to meet these increased crop production needs, they're faced with increasing threats on yield and production. These include climatic change and the abiotic stresses that climatic change is bringing, as well as limited resource availability and reduced resource quality. And these things combine to make production costs for many growers increase as they try to meet these increased food demands. And the result of all these trends is an increased impact on the environment and a threat to sustainable food production globally. So what are some of the market drivers that are really having an impact on this? One of the top part of this chart, you see, I've talked about consumer concerns, and the consumers are really concerned about sustainable food production, but more importantly for them personally, it's chemical pesticide residues in the food they consume, particularly in fresh market fruits and vegetables. Many of the food marketers and supermarkets see this as a marketing opportunity for them to differentiate from their competition, and they have established more stringent chemical pesticide residue requirements than the government requires. And this often leads to less chemical inputs being used. In the bottom half of the chart, we see government policies and support. In one aspect, this is promotional support. Policies established by the government to enhance or encourage the adoption of biopesticides. One of these being the farm to fork strategy in Europe, which may have a very dramatic impact on biopesticide use in Europe. Parts of that policy have established objectives of reducing chemical pesticide use by 50% by the year 2030. That's quite an aggressive goal, but if that goal is achieved, or even if it's even only partially achieved, it will have a significant impact on the biopesticide market in Europe. The second area is regulation, and regulation can sort of take two approaches here. In one hand, it can lead to less chemicals when regulators adopt policies that favor the registration and enhance the ability for biological products to be brought to market. On the other hand, in some parts of the world, we see that the regulatory guidelines continue to make it more challenging to register biopesticides. So we see both positive and negative impacts from regulation, depending on the part of the world we're in. Focusing a little bit more on those consumer concerns and impacts, you see here a sign from a grocery store based in the UK and called Marks and Spencer. And you see that this store is promoting specifically on the fact that they are restricting and banning the use of pesticides in the foods that they sell. And it's not limited just to specialty stores. It also is a broad trend. We see here the results in the text of a survey taken in the US several years ago. And we see that a large majority of the shoppers who are making what they call healthy food choices are electing to make some of those choices as organic. And when they make organic food choices, they're doing that as a way to avoid chemical pesticide residues. And the demographic of purchaser who is most likely to make these decisions are millennials. Those would be the young adults, young families in their prime earning years are the ones, not the older shoppers like myself. And we also see that a large percentage of shoppers are purchasing locally grown foods. And again, they're doing this, and one of the reasons that they state is to avoid chemical residues. So one of the aspects of this, as I mentioned, many food marketers see this as an opportunity to differentiate themselves from their competition. So they establish residue standards that exceed those, are more stringent than what the government requires. The consumer lacks an understanding of toxicology. They don't understand what a maximum residue level is, but they just assume that whoever has the most stringent restriction is the best. And on that basis, the supermarkets and food marketers compete with one another. The growers are sort of caught in the middle. They have to comply with these new standards. In many cases, that it requires them to make significant changes to how the crop is produced. If the grower wants to maximize the market for his crop, he has to meet the most restrictive standard. These trends are creating a real opportunity for biopesticides. Most biopesticides are exempt from maximum residue limits. They have shorter pre-harvest intervals, and they offer tools that the growers can use to, in place of chemical pesticides, particularly late in the growing season for fresh market fruits and vegetables, and allow them to reduce the potential for chemical pesticide residues to be detectable. This is an area where we've seen really driving the adoption of biopesticides in the fruit and vegetable market. So at the beginning of 2019, Dunnham Trimmer released a global study that we did on the bioprotection market. We refer to this now as our pre-COVID forecast, and you understand more a little bit later. But at that point, we saw a market that was approaching $4 billion in value. We thought that it was going to continue growing at the rate that we were seeing at that point, which was in excess of 15% annual growth rate, with some parts of the world even significantly higher than that. And we thought that before 2025, the value of this market would surpass $10 billion. We saw that Europe and North America were the two largest regions, but that Asia and Latin America were also contributing significant revenues. But as we all know, in late 2019, COVID appeared in China. Quickly, it expanded into a global pandemic and has had significant impact on the market. And some of the things that as we look at 2020, I mean, pretty much universally throughout the world, governments and countries recognize that food production was essential, that companies like biopesticide companies, fertilizer companies, seed companies that provided critical inputs to growers were also essential. So it wasn't a factor that the shutdowns or the pandemic forced these companies to stop operation. It was more the secondary impact of these shutdowns on the growers that they were selling to. Some specific markets where we saw real impacts, the cut flower markets in Africa and Latin America were really devastated by the pandemic and the shutdowns. As large gatherings were prohibited by various countries around the world, the sales of cut flowers to churches, for weddings and other events, just totally were disappeared for these growers. Similarly, the fresh market fruit and vegetable demand dropped as the shutdowns occurred and schools closed, business travel was curtailed, restaurants and hotels were forced to reduce the amount of things they were serving. So there was just a significant impact for many parts of the world on fruit and vegetable. In addition, we saw disruption of supply chain and logistics. Often, even when demand was present, it was challenging for manufacturers to get product shipped to the grower and delivered to the grower. And of course, restrictions on large gatherings and face-to-face meetings was significantly impacting how products were sold. Companies had to adopt and learn to use digital selling tools, video conferences, teleconferences, webinars, and other ways for sales, for technology transfer, for education, for scientific conferences like this one. They were all things that had to be adapted, and people had to learn new skills. But despite all these challenges, most companies saw opportunities for growth. And in late 2020, Dunnham Trimmer conducted a qualitative survey of the leading biopesticide companies. And part of that survey was to try and determine, what was the real impact of the COVID pandemic on the market in 2020. And we were pleasantly surprised to hear from over 40% of the respondents to our survey that they saw market growth that was greater or equal to 2019 in 2020. We also heard that while many companies said we did not manage to make our budget target for sales, they still saw a growth of sales over 2019. So despite the challenges that were faced and the many obstacles that were created by the COVID pandemic, this market continued to grow. If we look specifically at Asia Pacific and what we see for the future here, we see that in 2020, the market in Asia was approximately valued at about $800 million. We believe that this market is going to continue to grow here in Asia, and we are predicting that it will exceed $2.5 billion by 2030. Asia Pacific is growing faster than North America. It's also growing faster than many parts of Western Europe. And one of the unique things about Asia is we see a higher percentage of the market being made up of biochemical biopesticides, things like plant extracts based on neem and other similar types of products. Microbials are still a significant part of the marketplace here in Asia, but not as dominant as they are in North America and Latin America for sure. So as we look beyond 2021 and through the rest of this coming decade, our predictions are that we think that beginning by mid-2021 especially, we're going to see the growth of this industry begin to rebound. We think that the impact of COVID will subside as the vaccine distribution becomes more widespread. And we think that normal sales and technical promotional efforts will return. The fruit and vegetable markets are going to begin to mature, especially in Europe and North America. These have been the dominant markets for biocontrol use over the last decade. They're going to continue to be the most prevalent area where we see biocontrol, but the growth rate in these markets is going to slow in those parts of the world. We think the growth rate in Latin America, as well as in Asia, will remain strong. And we think that one thing that will help to offset some of the maturing market in Europe is these policy changes that I mentioned earlier. If Europe actually does succeed in restricting the use of chemical pesticides to a large degree, it's going to create significant opportunities for biopesticides. Longer term, as we get beyond 2025, the continued growth of bioprotection products at the kind of growth rates we've seen in the last decade is going to depend on two critical factors. We're going to need to see increased use and adoption of bioprotection products in row crops. Currently today, while there is a significant row crop market, it still is quite smaller than in comparison to the chemical market. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for growth there if effective biological products can be brought into those marketplaces. The other significant area is bioherbicides. Now, there are very, very few bioherbicides on the market today. They are, for the most part, niche products which are only used in organic production. Bioherbicides just have not been successful in their efficacy and their ability to compete with their chemical counterparts. This is a significant aspect of the marketplace because when you look at chemical pesticides, herbicides represent more than 40% of the total market. Whereas in biopesticides, bioherbicides represent less than 1%. So that's a real growth opportunity. If we can see some effective bioherbicides brought to the market and developed, I think there's a real opportunity for significant growth in that area. And there are a number of companies that are doing research in this area. So there's a good likelihood that we will see some successful products launched in the next 5 to 10 years. So when we put this all together, what do we see for the future? Well, we see a continuing growth, although slightly slower than we saw over the last 10 years for the next 5 years. And the reason it's slightly slower is we think that it's the maturing nature of the fruit and vegetable market in North America and Europe is going to slow the growth globally to some extent. But then we believe in the latter half of this decade, we may see an acceleration and a return to the growth rates that we saw previously in the earlier part of the last 10 years. And we think that may be driven by EU policy. It may be driven by increased use of biopesticides in row crops. And hopefully it will also be driven by the successful launching of some effective bioherbicide products. So in summary, as we look over the biopesticide and biocontrol market in total, the strengths of this market are the fact that it really addresses consumer demands for sustainability and reduced chemical pesticides. You combine that with an innovative group of companies that are driving this marketplace and really helping to make this marketplace continue to grow at rates that exceed those of chemical pesticides. The weaknesses of the marketplace continue to be that it's highly fragmented. Hundreds of small companies participate in this marketplace. Many of them have excellent products, but it's very challenging for a small company to gain the market access it needs to develop its products on a global basis. So that creates a real challenge for the industry as a whole. Some of the threats we see, regulation is always a threat, and also there's some new technology that may impact the size of the market that is available for biopesticides. Opportunities in the long term, it's really two things. Row crops and bioherbicides are significant opportunities, and we do see synergy with biostimulants and precision ag also helping to create opportunities for this market. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I have enjoyed participating with you here today, and I wish you all a very productive remainder of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mark Trimmer. Your presentation has certainly given new insights into biologicals, especially biocontrol agents and development of effective biopesticides, which is a fast-growing market worldwide. Also, accept my congratulations on celebrating 10 years of operation of Dunnham Trimmer. So now I